Magnolia's episode opens with a quiet, deceptively ordinary scene that masks the pressure building beneath every polite smile. The city's festival spills color into the streets, vendors shout, and a crowd clusters around an ice cream stall, images of ease and celebration that read like the opposite of the trouble that's been threading through life. She's not the carefree heroine in this moment. She's a woman who knows how her story once ended, and every laugh and lantern feels like a stage cue that might lead to the same cruel finale. Right away, the episode balances two tones, a light outward gaiety and an inward dread. Sister moves through the crowd like a magnet. People recognize her, call her name. She's the picture of the storybook heroine, graceful, adored, and unaware of the danger that seems to orbit her. The contrast is deliberate. Whereas presence draws warmth, presence draws scrutiny. That's not accidental. It's the residue of the narrative remembers writing in another life. She knows the plot's beats, the death flags, the way the story treats her as a villain destined to be discarded. This memory colors everything she does. The festival becomes less a simple stroll and more a chessboard for avoidance and protection. The episode quickly pivots from festival scenes to a chilling revelation. Young women, celebrated for their beauty, have begun to vanish. The police arrive in full authority, their uniforms and clipped speech slicing through the merriment. The deputy commander, a figure of law and public order, reads out the disturbing pattern: kidnappings targeting beautiful women across neighboring towns and castles. The stakes spike in an instant. The soundtrack goes quiet. The placement of this announcement is brilliant storytelling, a communal threat that reframes the festival's glow into a false brightness, a stage light revealing danger. Its immediate reaction is layered. She's protective, impulsive, and afraid, a knot of instincts. She knows from the story she lived through that when the heroine is in danger, the villainess often pays the price first. It's not only self-preservation, it's a calculated effort to stop the story's gears from clipping into place. There's a moment of tenderness in how she watches, earnest hope and fear mingling as she promises to shield her sister. This is one of the episode's quiet emotional cores, its devotion to despite the legacy of animosity she once authored. Her love here is protective rather than possessive, a reclamation of the role she was supposed to hate. The narrative introduces a complication through the police investigation. A detective named Shannon arrives, professional and unblinking, yet his questions are not innocent. Rumors and gaps in memory swirl. Families of missing girls acting strangely content. No clear motive, no sign of robbery or struggle, only a pattern. The episode uses this uncertainty to great effect, giving the audience the same uneasy vertigo feels. Everything familiar might be a setup. Where is the villain? Signature. Why are people smiling even as the spreads? This paranoia is not merely melodrama. It's the reflex of a woman who once manufactured tragedy. She remembers crafting scenes where heroines were endangered to advance a melodramatic plot. The show places her inner monologue against the external world, and the result is a powerful sense of cognitive dissonance. She sees narrative mechanics that others do not. That insight isolates her. It makes allies cautious. It makes servants and guards suspicious. The series stages this isolation well. Brief moments of warmth are undercut by looks that hold accusation like a blade. A tense scene unspools when accusations begin to land close to home. An officer, haunted and angry, confronts directly in a public interrogation-style confrontation. His voice blames her in a blunt, dangerous way. In his reasonings, earlier behavior, her proximity to the missing women, a past incident in which she wasn't punished as expected, becomes incriminating. The scene plays like an inversion of justice, hindsight turned into motive. This reaction is immediate. Fear, disbelief, the pragmatic calculation that if the police suspect her now, a full-on will follow. The show heightens this by strategically inserting small, seemingly banal details, a misremembered face, a tenuous connection to a party, and using them to suggest how easily social narratives can be weaponized. This is one of the series' most compelling themes: authorship versus fate. Once authored cruelty. Now reality authors consequences back at her. She interprets circumstance through the lens of plot devices and flags. That meta-awareness is both her advantage and her curse. It gives her clues, but it also makes it harder for others to trust her sincerity. The townsfolk's nervousness reads not as the natural anxiety of a community under threat, but as the mechanical trembling of a tail tightening toward catastrophe. The show refuses to let the audience rest in simple sympathy. Instead, it asks us to hold both things at once, the possibility of guilt and the possibility of scapegoating. Amid that rising pressure, an invitation arrives that forces a different kind of choice. Amaryllis, the Duchess famed for beauty and influence, sends an invitation to a birthday party, a glittering social gauntlet. The timing is almost theatrical. It arrives right after the police warning, and the contrast is uncomfortable. Emotions fray. She longs to attend both as social acceptance and as a way to reclaim agency, but attending risks exposure. The episode uses this tension to explore yearning for normalcy. She is drawn to the Duchess's salon not because she craves aristocratic approval in an empty way, but because being invited feels like a small victory against the narrative that tried to box her into villainy. When she does attend, the party sequences show the duality of courtly life. Glitter and music overlay snark and social cruelty. An elegant woman spills wine on, and the reaction crystallizes the layered humiliation faces. She's simultaneously the recipient of aristocratic condescension and the living symbol of a story they all recognize but won't openly name. There's a real ache in the way recalls her past life's obsessions in middle school, the fantasies that turn dark. That childhood intimacy with melodrama, devouring tales of kidnappings and curses, explains both her narrative knowledge and her vulnerability. She recognizes the story she once loved, but this time it's not fiction. It bleeds into her reality. A tender counterbalance comes through an unexpected friendship. At the party, meets other girls. One of them, or a similar name in translation, offers a simple connection, a shared aristocratic background that is not automatically hostile. The way bridges the class gap is crucial. It humanizes the social circles where has previously felt only threat. The show allows a small reprieve here. Conversation after conversation peels back layers of past. Her mother's death in the slums, the cold reception from her sister's legitimate branch of the family, the social cruelty of being treated as a purchased companion rather than kin. These revelations keep the viewer from tossing into a single moral bucket. They complicate her, making her a person who hurt and who was hurt. Backstage, the police investigation keeps simmering. The episode uses procedural beats to prod at narrative inevitability. Investigators suggest that the missing women might not be victims at all, but rather relocated, perhaps complicit with their disappearance. It's an unsettling theory, and the way it's presented reveals a world where appearances are everything. The police's inability to explain motive, paired with their certainty in putting faces together, becomes an ominous machinery that could easily mistake pattern for purpose. Fear escalates because she knows the storybook solution all too well. When the plot needs a villain, communities hungry for closure invent one. There's a crystalline scene where, caught between the desire to rest and the drive to intervene, decides to listen in on conversations she thinks might reveal the plot. Eavesdropping is staged not as petty curiosity but as survival. The episode frames it with sympathetic camera work, a close focus on slightly parted curtains, a softening of the ambient noise, turning a small act of espionage into a moral necessity. This moment also underscores agency. She isn't waiting for rescue. She's using the one skill she has, understanding stories, seeing how events line up, and using that map to preempt harm. The episode's emotional pinnacle comes when accusation again lands at her feet, a jolt from a character who insists past conduct. Her proximity to the victims and her prior run-ins with law enforcement make her culpable. It's a brutal touchstone. The show refuses to let us off the hook with easy heroism. Instead, it asks viewers to feel the dread of a woman who knows the machinery of storytelling and now watches it start. This internal monologue here is powerful. She imagines the death flag unfurling, not as metaphor, but as an impending bureaucratic consequence. The police's procedural certainty clashes with narrative uncertainty. This is social death. People's whispered suspicions coagulate into the shape of a real threat. But the episode doesn't leave the audience in despair. Despite the public suspicion, there are small human gestures that affirms core. Companions like and others show loyalty in practical ways. Clothing, quiet protection, and private jokes that recall a life beyond the plot. Friendship is treated as a counter-narrative, self-defining relationships that refuse to be subsumed by the story's cruel arcs. These bonds are both comforting and strategically wise. They provide with a network that could help dismantle the false story being told about her. As the episode winds toward its close, the social setting shifts back to the festival's peripheral glow. Reflects on her middle school obsessions, the way she once romanticized perilous stories of kidnapped beauties and cursed heroines. There's a confession here. She used to daydream herself into the other world, imagining waking up there. Now she truly inhabits a world she once wrote, but with hard-earned clarity about the costs of narrative cruelty. That self-awareness creates a determination not to repeat the mistakes of a younger, less ethical author self. The final moments give us a careful blend of anxiety and resolve. Invitations continue to arrive, protective measures are promised. The past shadows linger, but its decisions show growth. She no longer accepts the role others assign her. Instead, she moves like a woman drafting a new chapter, cautious, strategic, and connected to people who see her differently than the plot once did. The episode closes on a note that is both ominous and hopeful. The threats remain, and the machinery of suspicion is still in motion, but the story's author has changed. Is no longer content to be a villain in someone else's morality play. This episode is an intention built from social detail rather than spectacle. It asks the audience to hold ambiguity without easy answers. Its strengths lie in character work. Its interiority is rich and often contradictory. Its unwitting heroism complicates loyalties. The police and nobles embody the landscape of public image and private danger. Thematic threads, fate versus authorship, the consequences of youthful fantasies and the cost of being othered are woven through everyday actions, invitations, spilled wine, and whispered accusations. The show doesn't sensationalize violence. Instead, it shows how stories can be made to gaslight a person into being a monster. The takeaway is humane. People who are written as villains can choose to rewrite themselves. Path isn't easy, and the world around her still values surface narrative over nuance. But in her alliances, her small acts of care, and her refusal to be cowed by prophecy, she becomes a quiet revolution. The episode leaves the audience alert and invested not merely in solving a mystery, but in watching a woman reclaim authorship over her life. Next, the tale will need to answer whether the social machinery will allow that reclamation, or whether rumor and official force will knot her back into a role she's determined to escape. The stakes are personal, political, and literary all at once, and that triple edge is what keeps this series compelling.